Huh.
Already, folks, it's your nighttime DJ Music.
And this is Charlamagne. Join us each and every Wednesday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time for On The Beat.
That's right, folks. Charlamagne, DJ Music, classic R&B jams radio. On The Beat.
Soulful sounds all around town.
If it's something hot you want, then it's something hot you'll get.
Sunday is July 4th, Independence Day, which is when this country commemorates the adoption of the Declaration of Independence. In it, 13 North American British colonies announced their separation from Great Britain.
Every year for the past 32 years, Morning Edition has broadcast a reading of the Declaration of Independence by NPR staff. But after last summer's protests and our country attempting to confront its history,
Alrighty there, ladies and gentlemen, just let me pause that just for a second and say hello to those of you who are tuning in right now. I had to switch players over there, so let's hope this one works. And again, you're about to hear a rendition of the Declaration of Independence, and you'll see exactly why I felt it was so important for you guys to hear this before we dwell into what our subject's going to be today. So for those of you already tuned in, thank you so very much. Sorry about the live by the sword, die by the sword, but here we go. Well, sometimes you just start over for some reason. Well, anyway, let's try it again. Alrighty, folks, it's your nighttime DJ Music.
And this is Charlamagne. Join us each and every Wednesday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time for On The Beat.
That's right, folks. Charlamagne, DJ Music, classic R&B jams radio. On The Beat.
Soulful sounds all around town.
If it's something hot you want, then it's something hot you'll get.
Sunday is July 4th, Independence Day, which is when this country commemorates the adoption of the Declaration of Independence. In it, 13 North American British colonies announced their separation from Great Britain.
every year for the past 32 years, Morning Edition has broadcast a reading of the Declaration of Independence by NPR staff. But after last summer's protests and our country attempting to confront its history, we want and need to be honest about the words in this document. It famously declares that all men are created equal, even though women, enslaved people, and indigenous Americans were not held as equal at the time.
What follows is a long list of grievances and charges against King George III. The Declaration was written largely by Thomas Jefferson and edited by the Continental Congress. Among the edits, the Congress deleted a reference to, quote, Scotch and foreign mercenaries. Turns out there were members of the Congress who were of Scottish descent. To win support from Southerners, the Congress removed criticism of the African slave trade.
But a racist slur against Native Americans stayed in. You're going to hear those words today. The Declaration is a document with flaws and deeply ingrained hypocrisies. It also laid the foundation for our collective aspirations, our hopes for what this country could be. So in that spirit, here again is the Declaration of Independence as read by NPR staff.
When, in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed.
That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness.
Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed.
But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security.
Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government.
The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world.
He has refused his assent to laws, the most wholesome and necessary for the public good. He has forbidden his governors to pass laws of immediate and pressing importance, unless suspended in their operation till his assent should be obtained. And when so suspended, he has utterly neglected to attend to them.
He has refused to pass other laws for the accommodation of large districts of people, unless those people would relinquish the right of representation in the legislature, a right inestimable to them and formidable to tyrants only.
He has called together legislative bodies at places unusual, uncomfortable, and distant from the depository of their public records for the sole purpose of fatiguing them into compliance with his measures.
He has dissolved representative houses repeatedly for opposing with manly firmness
Hey Shar, hey Sheed, how y'all doing?
People.
Good to see you.
He's refused for a long time, after such dissolutions, to cause others to be elected, whereby the legislative powers, incapable of annihilation, have returned to the people at large for their exercise, the state remaining in the meantime exposed to all the dangers of invasion from without and convulsions within.
He has endeavored to prevent the population of these states, for that purpose obstructing the laws for naturalization of foreigners, refusing to pass others to encourage their migrations hither, and raising the conditions of new appropriations of lands.
He has obstructed the administration of justice by refusing his assent to laws for establishing judiciary powers. He has made judges dependent on his will alone for the tenure of their offices and the amounted payment of their salaries.
He has erected a multitude of new offices and sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people and eat out their substance.
He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. He has effected to render the military independent of and superior to the civil power.
He has combined with others to subject us to a jurisdiction foreign to our Constitution and unacknowledged by our laws, giving his assent to their acts of pretended legislation.
For quartering large bodies of armed troops among us, for protecting them by a mock trial from punishment for any murders which they should commit on the inhabitants of these states.
For cutting off our trade with all parts of the world, for imposing taxes on us without our consent, for depriving us in many cases of the benefits of trial by jury.
for transporting us beyond seas to be tried for pretended offenses, for abolishing the free system of English laws in a neighboring province, establishing therein an arbitrary government, and enlarging its boundaries so as to render it at once an example and fit instrument for introducing the same absolute rule into these colonies.
For taking away our charters, abolishing our most valuable laws, and altering fundamentally the forms of our governments. For suspending our own legislatures and declaring themselves invested with power to legislate for us in all cases whatsoever.
He has abdicated government here by declaring us out of his protection and waging war against us. He has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people.
He is, at this time, transporting large armies of foreign mercenaries to complete the works of death, desolation, and tyranny, already begun with circumstances of cruelty and perfidy scarcely paralleled in the most barbarous ages, and totally unworthy the head of a civilized nation.
He has constrained our fellow citizens taken captive on the high seas to bear arms against their country, to become the executioners of their friends and brethren, or to fall themselves by their hands.
He has excited domestic insurrections amongst us and has endeavored to bring on the inhabitants of our frontiers, the merciless Indian savages, whose known rule of warfare is an undistinguished destruction of all ages, sexes, and conditions. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury.
A prince whose character is thus marked by every act which may define a tyrant is unfit to be the ruler of a free people. Nor have we been wanting in attentions to our British brethren. We have warned them from time to time of attempts by their legislature to extend an unwarrantable jurisdiction over us.
We have reminded them of the circumstances of our emigration and settlement here. We have appealed to their native justice and magnanimity, and we have conjured them by the ties of our common kindred to disavow these usurpations, which would inevitably interrupt our connections and correspondence.
They, too, have been deaf to the voice of justice and of consanguinity. We must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation, and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends.
We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America, in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do, in the name and by authority of the good people of these colonies, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states.
That they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved.
And that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do.
And for the support of this declaration with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
"245 years ago this Sunday, church bells rang out over Philadelphia as the Continental Congress adopted this draft of the Declaration of Independence.
So basically what they're saying, folks, the big lie started 245 years ago. Because if you listen to what you just heard was the Declaration of Independence, read word for word. NPR has been doing that for the last 32 years. Out of sight, out of mind. Those were the words. Now, when you hear them, instead of reading them, now you understand why I always say, In order for us to be put on a level playing field as black folks, you got to start at the root, and the root is that so-called Constitution, that Declaration of Independence that decreed that all men were free, that was drafted and written mostly by Thomas Jefferson, a man known to own slaves. But according to some folks that you see in the mainstream news now, this would be critical race theory, when it's all an actual and factual fact. Those were the words for word for word, as they say, where you put your John Hancock at. They don't even teach it correctly. They don't even tell people the actual day that it was written and it was ratified and such and so on and so forth. They just know that baseball, apple pie, Chevrolet, mud wrestling, mud bogging, we got to do all of that on the 4th of July and go to the beach and get tanned up without a care in the world. Meanwhile, you see black folks in droves. And I can tell you for a fact, going to Stone Mountain Park, I guarantee you right now, if you was to take a poll of anyone that's in Georgia that lives in the Gwinnett County area and ask them what you're doing for the 4th, I'm going to Stone Mountain Park. Can't see the forest for the trees. That's some of the things that's etched right there on that mountainside, that mountaintop, is the very reason why, if they caught you there some 50, 60 years ago, there was one way in and no way out. And you know what I mean by that. Actual and factual. But this is the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution that they say was written for everybody. Well, how could that be if Thomas Jefferson wrote it? And in the meantime, right after partaking in the ceremonies, he go home and see a yard full of black folks that he owns. Picture that. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equally. Now you see why I say go back and revisit racism at its core, where it started at some 245 years ago, once that John Hancock signature got on there, and all the white folks that were standing around, all the Continental Congress from the 13 colonies, got us to this. And every year we celebrate independence, where just some 20-some days ago, well, probably less than 20-some days ago, we were celebrating Juneteenth, and the backlash from Candace Owens, ABL Bootlicker, Angry Man the Dumbass, and a whole bunch of these folks, these black so-called YouTube streamers that'll get on here and disparage us as black people, make them feel good about it. I wonder if they ever took the time to listen to what that we just listened to. Cynthia G, you two included. A few of you other folks, I wonder if y'all take the time to do what I did and listen to that Constitution. I back up my words. I say the Constitution is a farce when it comes to black people. White people use it for two things, either to put you in trouble or to get out of trouble. Look at Donald Trump. Look how long he was able to shield his taxes as the President of the United States based on what they wrote in the Constitution. Look how long they were able to oppress black people based what they wrote on the Constitution at the time of its pending and its drafting and its thought of. Black people weren't considered as full humans. So how can folks argue with me and tell me that this document was written for us? We should celebrate it coming up next month. That we should go around and wave the flag. That when we're on these Olympic podiums, we should hold our hand, our heart, and hold ourselves proud that we're representing the United States of America. Only the good part. We got y'all good niggas out there. We got y'all fast, strong, smart niggas out there. Don't say nothing bad about us, or we'll put you down. Case in point, the black female shot putter turned her back on the national anthem, even though They will tell you, they will report all over the news that every time you go up to the podium, every time someone wins and they have the medal ceremony, that they play the national anthem. It is true, but not doing the prequels. They only play it twice a day, in the morning and in the evening. Look it up for yourself. The only time that they play it after every event of the medal ceremonies, after each event when they're crowning the winner, is during the Olympics. Factual, actual. Look it up for yourself. So they knew what they were doing. They knew she already had a political stance about what's going on, so they decided to push the issue to her. But see, you get some of these dumbass black folks out here and on these YouTube streets and the mainstream media that will tell you that what she did was sacrilegious. That what she did, she chose to represent the United States of America through the Olympics. No, she chose to represent herself and go win. It just so happens that her ticket to get there was the United States of America. She trained. She put in the blood, sweat, and tears. Most people go to the Olympics to really, if you ask me, to celebrate and solidify their legacy. Leave a mark on this earth that I was the fastest man in the world. Again, before I sat down today, I went and I looked through a few of the streams that's out here that's presented by the brothers and the sisters. They screaming at each other. They cursing each other out. They telling another woman what she know about this, what she know about that. They talking about Kevin Samuels, Kwame Brown, still talking about these folks, that folks. But here it is. You get a few little lone channels like mine that talk about actual and factual. Guess what it does? It only gets out to a few of your family members and your friends, hoping you reach just one person that'll spread it out amongst the crowd. Satisfaction enough, but over in the YouTube streets, it's got to come with a $. Hit the link, and I'll give you some more information. Don't cost you nothing like the grace of day around here to get this. Black people as the 4th of July celebrating in droves. Going over the river and through the woods to grandmama's house we go, not doing Thanksgiving but the 4th of July, because that's one of the most heavily travel days in the year, the 4th of July. Most people are on vacation during the summer months. Plan it that way so they can go suck up some sun, visit some relatives that they ain't seen all year, knowing you don't really want to see them anyway, but god damn it, I gotta go to Florida. But they'll tell us, celebrate. In the spirit of brotherhood, we, the United States of America, overthrew the British government to become an independent country, and look at the greatness of us. And they want to omit black people from their so-called greatness. That's what the Declaration of Independence spelled out. It was created for white men. Not even for the white women, because they excluded them too. It wasn't created for the indigenous Indian people. They excluded them too. But who received the brunt of that? We did. But they'll tell us that we shouldn't teach this. You should only celebrate America's history. You shouldn't desecrate it. Truth is truth. It don't care. It don't need no alibi. All over Fox News. The last time I spoke about that had said it, critical race theory over close to 2,800 times. Now they're close to 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 times that they've said critical race theory. Who are they applying to? I'll tell you, I know exactly who they're applying to. They're applying to those 77-some million folks that voted for Donald Trump, that see their way of life slowly but surely ticking away. Now, sometimes, folks, in order for folks to hear you, you got to get somebody that looks like them that they'll pay attention to. So I did just that. I went and found somebody that they might pay attention to. Someone that looks like them, talks like them, acts like them, and the majority of times thinks like them. But after this video here, I'm sure he was not welcome at the dinner table. You know, there's some people out here, when I say white folks, there's some white people out here that get it, that understand. They understand why it should be taught. They confront they want to atone, either through themselves or through their grandparents. They want that aha moment. They love that. Oh, I didn't know that. You mean all these years I didn't? You mean a black man did that? Yeah. Sure did. Listen to this dude. If I can get it over here. Button up my sleeve. Come over here. Maybe you'll act right. Technology. It's the flash, baby. It's the flash. It's the flash, I'm telling you. You know, see? You don't want to act right again. Everything acting up. There we go. Let's try this. But anyway, folks, as I'm trying to get this correct here, let's try this. Put it in here. Did you do it? Yeah. There we go. Well, I thought it did. Y'all just continue to do what you're doing. I'm gonna find it in here somewhere. And put it in here. Oh, there we go. Here we go. Check this out, folks.
Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again. So today we are going to talk about what the United States fundamentally is, or is not. Teaching history, a theory, and we're going to do this because I got a message, got a question.
Hey, crew, what's going on with you, brother?
To talk about. It means nothing because he passed the fundamentally racist 1994 crime bill. Can we please move past the idea
that they listen to? He's quite a huge following. So these are the folks, they're not mainstream like Rush Limbaugh and all them, but you know, just as we have our YouTube high streams, high watch streams, they have theirs as well. And this guy named, as he said, Bo coming at you. All right, Bo, finish him.
Okay, so just quick little fact checks here. CRT is not Biden's thing. It's an academic movement. It doesn't have anything to do with Joe Biden. The sender claims it's fundamentally racist. That's just black Americans right there. If we want to stop at this point, you don't even have to.
All right there, ladies and gentlemen. Let's try this again. Let's see what's going on here. Am I live or is this Memorex? Am I live or is this Memorex? Let's try this again. I will only do the voice. I won't do any streams. Let's try that. Let's leave that. You don't even have to. Let's leave that stream right where it is. All right there, folks. Let's try this again. I'm just only going to use the voice module in this. If you can hear me down in the listening lounge, give me a 1 or a 2. Give me a 1 or a 2 if you can hear me down in the lounge. Give me a 1 or a 2 if you're down in the lounge. Let me take the white dude off the screen. Yeah. Let me take the white dude off the screen. Yup.
Huh.
Alrighty. It's your nighttime DJ music. Alright, let's just leave that right there then. We'll leave it right there. We'll just use that moniker right there. Can you folks see it now? 1 or 2? 1 or 2? All right, thank you so very much. Well, I had some clips to show you guys, of course, of what was going on. Trying to use those as my backdrop here, and maybe it'll allow me to play it in the background, and we can play it from there, and I can catch a clip of it from there, a glimpse of it from there. You folks may be able to hear me from there. So let's try it from that way, and I'll play the clip, and you folks let me know if you can hear it or not as we're going along here. Okay. So let's try it that way, and that way I won't have to put any video on it.
Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again. So today we are going to talk about what the United States fundamentally is, or is not. Teaching history, a theory, and we're going to do this because I got a message, got a question to talk about it. Request to talk about it.
Can you folks hear that now?
Can you talk about the absurdity of liberals arguing that we should teach American history that says America is fundamentally racist through Joe Biden's CRT?
Yes. Can y'all hear that?
Biden's support of the theory means nothing because he passed the fundamentally racist 1994 crime bill. Can we please move past the idea that everything is racist and just teach real objective American history? Okay, so just quick little fact checks here. CRT is not Biden's thing. It's an academic movement. It doesn't have anything to do with Joe Biden. That's just not a thing. The 1994 crime bill, that's the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act. The senator claims it's fundamentally racist. I happen to agree. With that. And then we have the actual question, what they want discussed. Is the United States fundamentally racist? Well, first we have to determine what that means. Fundamentally racist. If you're just talking about people's attitudes, the people of the United States, are they fundamentally racist? Or generally speaking, are most people racist? Yeah. And that goes through the overwhelming majority of American history. Absolutely. So you could mean that. Or you could mean, is there some structural, institutionalized legislation that is racist? Well, let's just run through a timeline, and we'll see if it's there. Okay, pick your founding date, doesn't matter. 1776, 1789, does not matter. Okay? From day one, there was institutional, legal racism. It was enshrined. It was a part of the American structure in slavery. That lasted until the 1860s, and then it went through a fundamental change. Okay? So you have that legal structure in the beginning. When it ended, almost immediately was replaced with a less severe, structural, institutionalized, legal form of racism. And that lasted about 100 years, until the 1960s, late 1960s. That's just black Americans, right there. If we want to stop at this point, you don't even have to get into the Exclusion Act or the treatment of Native Americans. The removal of Native Americans is how it is framed in most American history books. The removal of Native Americans. That is like a really super polite way to describe ethnic cleansing, which is what it was. And that started from day one. And it doesn't matter how you want to define it. At the very least, that went on until 1918. Because up until that point, the U.S. military was at arms fighting against natives. That's a pretty big chunk of American history there. But then we have something else, thanks to this email. According to this email, they claim, and I believe, that the 1994 bill, that act, was fundamentally racist. I agree with that. I think it was. I would note that while some of the effects of that have been lessened, that law is still on the books. A fundamentally racist piece of legislation is still there. So from day one, from the founding until today, you have racist legislation.
As he said, from day one until today, you have racist pieces of legislation still on the books. Just like in Beaufort, South Carolina, folks, there's a law that's still actually on the books right now, and you can check this out if you want to. On the first, I think it's the first Sunday of each month, you are, as a married man, you are allowed to take your wife to the courthouse steps, and from 12 o'clock to 12:01, put as many hits and beat her as long as you can, and hit as many times you can in that 1 minute for her either back sassing or talking to you or not doing something that she was supposed to do, basically not being a good wife. You could do that publicly and nobody would mess with you. Bring your wife from the house, beat her at the courthouse steps from 12 to 12:01. That's a law that's still on the books in Beaufort, South Carolina, right along with not being able to tie your horse up to a public hitching post without permission. Still on the books.
I would suggest that that would make a country fundamentally racist. If other nations that are held up as super racist nations studied the United States' laws to figure out how to do it, that might be a good sign too. That happened. The U.S. has a long history of racism. That is objective reality. That's history. That's the truth. You can argue that it shouldn't be taught that way all you want, but at that point you're not arguing that you want history taught a certain way. You're arguing that you want mythology taught a certain way. The United States, its history is...
Say that again. Any deviation from the truth, you're not teaching history. You're only teaching what makes you feel good. Again, like my man said, you're teaching mythology. Anything that you have to tell and it starts off with a lie, you're going to have to add to that lie each time you tell that story to make it correct, to make it travel. Storytelling. America is great at that. One of the greatest people that they revere is Mark Twain, because he was good at storytelling. Rod Sterling, because he was good at storytelling.
Littered with racism, with structural, institutionalized racism that would suggest the country is fundamentally racist. It's just there. This isn't actually a controversial theory as far as the United States being a fundamentally racist nation. Now, CRT is basically just saying, hey, we need to acknowledge this and acknowledge that there are injustices that are occurring, and using a historical lens to do that. That's kind of the purpose of history. You learn history so you don't repeat the mistakes. If the United States was a person who was 100 years old, and you discount this email and the 1994 stuff, and you just run from the founding to the end of segregation, that would mean that the person was 80 years old before they stopped being as racist, overtly racist, and just relied on the more subtle forms. If you met somebody who was 100 years old and throughout 80 years of their life they were overtly racist, you would probably suggest they were fundamentally racist. This isn't controversial. You can ban teaching this all you want, but it's reality. Those are the facts. The United States was founded and built on institutionalized racism. There's no real arguing this. It doesn't matter which pieces you want to count or discount. It's there. It's there underlying the United States' history. Does it get lessened over time? Yeah. Is it gone? No. If it was gone, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Until people are comfortable with acknowledging the past, we have to assume that there's still a lot of racism. because you're denying something that is objective reality. Anyway, it's just a thought. Y'all have a good day.
Well, that's just a thought. And that's an actual, it's not just a thought, it's actual and factual. It's truth. That is truth. The America as we know it is fundamentally a racist country. Just based on, like he said, if you started from the beginning times of slavery to the end of Jim Crow and start of segregation, that's enough right there. You don't have to continue with the crime bill from Biden and so-called and so forth. You don't have to talk about that. You don't have to talk about, wait a minute, let me get this point. Because he brought up something that was as absolutely stunning again, that some of the things that we say here in these streets. You know, there's a lot of these old guys in the Senate right now that was back there in the that's 80s, in their 80s, early 80s, and in their 70s. So now you understand what I'm talking about. Absolutely, Shadra. And he said it with, I mean, without, I wish you guys could see the video, but he said it with such clarity. It's like, okay, what's the argument? The things that I'm pointing out to you folks, I mean, the things that's, like he said, painfully obvious is objective reality. Objective means that if you, just because you see truth, you choose not to. Hey, Sheed, what's going on, brother? You choose not to look at it, or you choose to ignore it. I don't see anything wrong with teaching history to children, whether it's good or bad. If there's a hot stove in your house, don't you teach your child, once he touch it, don't touch the stove again, and every time the child goes near it, what they do? Hey, stay away from that stove. There's something bad over there. And that's basically the same thing about America coming into its realization of who and what it is. Starts about, again, like I said, about every 100 years. It's a day of reckoning for the majority of white America. Whether you like it or not, whether you say that this country is not racist, there's nothing, absolutely no document right now that you can prove to me that isn't. Because it's all based off the Constitution. The Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, is fundamentally what? A racist document. It's a misogynistic document. It is all those things that they're talking about right now, that the Me Too movement would have had a field day with them boys back in the day. You know what I mean? They would have had a field day with them. Again, now I really need these. I need these visual clips to go on further about what I wanted to explain to you here. But again, every time white folks come at us with this critical race theory, they always throw up a black face, you know, to try and lessen it. They always try to say that, well, no, it's just theory. It's just theory. And the person that wrote this is fundamentally wrong because he teaches it to children. Well, listen for yourself.
So Republicans are fanning the flames of a new culture war, claiming the teaching of critical race theory is a threat to our kids and to community relations. But this isn't just some abstract argument. They're actually pushing through legislation in state after state as we speak. Legislation aimed at making sure it can't be talked about in schools, which isn't just dumb because critical race theory isn't taught in schools to begin with. It's taught to law students in university. But it's also a complete violation of the First Amendment from a party that claims to be all about free speech.
Here we are, not even 30 seconds into this, and already talking about a violation of your Constitution. See what I mean? Not even 30 seconds into this clip. And it's something that they want to protect. They'll use the Constitution to stand by it. But if it's something they wanted to get rid of, they'll throw those 2 letters in front of it, UN, unconstitutional, you know what I mean? All of a sudden, this happens.
Joining me now is Kimberly Crenshaw, Executive Director with the African American Policy Forum. She's also a law professor at Columbia and UCLA, host of the podcast Intersectionality Matters, and she's the one who coined the phrase intersectionality and also co-founded critical race theory. Kimberly, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Your African American Policy Forum is campaigning against these Republican censorship campaigns. So I want to start by asking you to please explain what critical race theory actually is, because Tucker Carlson and Marjorie Taylor Greene clearly don't have a clue. You do, you helped found it. Define it for our viewers, please, in the simplest of terms.
Well, the simplest of terms, and thanks for the opportunity. Critical race theory is the study of law and how it has been part of the infrastructure from slavery to emancipation to segregation to today, upon which racial inequalities have been based.
Anybody care to argue with me so far about the Constitution? Isn't that what all law is based on? The constitutionality of it or the unconstitutionality of a certain law? Isn't it? Since when do 5th graders take law classes? So it's obvious that here the lady that you hear is one of the co-founders of it. So are you going to dispute her, Tucker Carlson, about her own work? It's a law. It's taught in law schools. It's taught in colleges. It's basically at this point in time, it's a basic, how you say it, case study. If you see the woman, she's probably in her maybe late 40s, early 50s. So she couldn't have been around in 1775 talking about critical race theory, could she? Matter of fact, she couldn't have even been walking around in 1775. But here again, you have the politicians and anybody who think that it'll serve their purpose spouting out CRT, critical race theory. It's in the news every night. It's some shape, form, or fashion, folks. The mainstream media speaks of it. The radio speaking on it. The so-called Fox News Network, OAN, and all these other right-wing so-called pundit groups. The Sean Hannitys of the world. The Tucker Carlsons of the world. This is the stuff that they're saying that is fundamentally not right to teach their children. But they'll teach them about the Battle of Little Bighorn. Anything that the Americas can win. Notice they don't speak to, you don't hear the United States of America too much speaking about the Korean War. They went into somebody's backyard, I should say. We went into somebody's backyard and got our asses handed to us. Let's omit that. This country been at war technically since 1991, the first salvo of the Gulf War. Technically, we've been at war for how many years now? Critical race theory. I guess you're not supposed to teach your child that either.
It's basically an effort to think about, we have had commitments to equality since the 14th Amendment, yet our reach has not realized itself in real equality. So we're basically just asking questions and looking at the way that law has been a conduit for racial inequality, and therefore what we need to do about law in order to bring us closer to the dreams that we have as a society. But let me be clear. This is not about critical race theory. Ted Cruz knows what critical race theory is and isn't. The people who are trying to create this hysteria around critical race theory know what critical race theory is or isn't. What this is backlash politics, coming precisely at a moment where finally racial justice has become a majoritarian interest on the part of Americans from all races and all classes. So this is a way of pushing back against that without saying that we're for racism.
Yes.
They can say we're against critical race theory.
Yes, well said. And you mentioned Ted Cruz, like you, an alumnus of Harvard Law School. He compared critical race theory to the KKK. What is your response to that, to Senator Cruz on that specific comparison?
Well, it would be laughable if it weren't so dangerous and if it weren't so familiar.
Yes.
This is a mob mentality trying to Willie Hortonize racial justice. And we've seen it before. We saw it right after the end of the Civil War, when the idea that racial equality was anti-white racism was articulated by the President of the United States.
Exactly. Articulated by a couple of presidents of the United States. Remember, when Woodrow Wilson screened that cinematic movie that they called a blockbuster movie back in the day, the greatest thing since sliced bread, Woodrow Wilson called it a great piece of cinematic work, A Birth of a Nation. Well, basically, all it did throughout the movie was revive the Klan and show white America that black people are just savages that prey on the innocent lily white girls. We got to protect them at all measures. So what? For the number 6 dance. You spare the woman? No, we raped the shit out of them at the number 6 dance later. Because if you look at the history of white America, basically, I'm talking to white males right now. Y'all done y'all women some injustice too. But that's a whole different story. I ain't got time for that. Not today. We're talking about this critical race theory thing that you folks keep spouting out every day like it's something that's going to harm your children. There's no worse than harming your children with falsehoods and lies, just like Donald Trump. Now his children are in trouble. But again, bringing up Donald Trump in comparison, look at all the blue hairs around him. All those folks were back in the day when talking to a black person any kind of way was all right. Mitch McConnell, he's near 80. Joe Biden, he's near 80. Let's see who else now. A bunch of them old blue hairs up off in there. And they're in places, they're look at the Supreme Court justices. I bet if you walked them to them chambers, it would smell like Bengay and Aspercreme. Guaranteed. But those are the people, those are the movers and shakers of our world. And what, just like they said with the lady said, coming out of the civil rights movement, they had to come up with something. They did that. Now, a lot of people will agree, you can disagree with this all you want to, but the pandemic put America, it snatched some of their power from them. It almost puts everybody on a level playing field. Why I say that? Because if you go all around, every place where you go now, every place you go has a help wanted sign, we hiring sign. That means this is, as they say in the real estate, this is a buyer's market. You can pick and choose what you want, but guess what? They still handing out them unemployment checks of $600 a week. Who the fuck gonna go back to work if somebody giving you $600 a week to stay home? All money ain't good money, folks.
President Johnson, who vetoed civil rights, saying that it was reverse discrimination. It took away from white people and gave to black people. But that wasn't the last time we saw it. We saw it during the civil rights movement, when many white people said, equality, being forced to serve you violates my civil rights. So the idea that anti-racism is anti-white is a tried and true playbook move. It used to be part of the neo-nationalist right. It's now moved to the center of the Republican Party on the heels of this so-called hysteria around critical race theory.
And hysteria indeed it is. You've written nearly a dozen books on race issues, including one literally called Critical Race Theory. I want to put it in the mail to Ted Cruz's office. There's new polling out this week from The Economist, which found only 26% of Americans say they've heard a lot about critical race theory, with an additional 38% saying they've heard a little. Of those a little, over half say they have a good idea of what critical race theory is, or they think they do, and the majority view it unfavorably. If you take a look at the number of mentions the term critical race theory is getting over on Fox News, it's gone through the roof in recent months. How much does that worry you? How much does that tell you that this country is not in a good place, especially on the right?
Yeah. You know,
you don't have to be a rocket scientist. I didn't mean to cut you off, Miss Lady, but you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see that this country is getting nastier. You know, on one of my posts that I had put way some time ago, probably 2-3 years ago now, it says "Walking While Black," about 2 years ago. And of course, at some set points, some point in time, I guess some folks still see it, so they decide to. One dude in particular said that my channel is a race baiting channel because all I talk about is the bad things that happen to black people. So in reverse, what should I do? Talk about the bad things that white people get, or talk about the good things that happen to black people? Is that what you prefer? Would that make you feel comfortable? I should only talk about the good part of the society. You come over to YouTube to get that fuzzy, warm feeling from a post that you just clicked on because you saw, oh, this got a lot of numbers on it. I wonder what they're talking about. And you went to a clip that was almost 3 years old. And from that one clip, you relish my channel, my entire body of work, to a race baiting channel. And then have the nerve to want to go back and dialogue with me about what the color of your skin is. I don't give a damn what the color of your skin is, whether you're black, brown, blue, or purple. There's a lot of these folks that you hear seeing this when you walk up to them, the man on the street, because actually that was the original purpose of me doing On the Beat. I was actually going to walk around with a little handheld camera and just ask people about what they thought about the topics and ideas of the day and come back and play for you folks. But unfortunately, the pandemic struck, so got away from that. That ain't no news worth dying for. Nope, sorry. Critical race theory, CRT, shorten it so it's digestible for them, so they can talk about it, they can label it quickly now. CRT. That's all the Democrats are doing. CRT, critical race theory, ladies and gentlemen. That's just how Ted Cruz says it. CRT. That's what they want you to think over there. That's what the Democrats want you to think. They're teaching our children about slavery, about Jim Crow. No, we shouldn't forget about it. But history has its place. Some history needs to be remained on the shelf. Well, this history that you're talking about, Senator Ted Cruz, it's living, it's a breathing entity of the United States of America way of living. You can't live without it. Your kind cannot live without racism. Your fear is that you have to be on top. And to speak on the ills of it would knock out some of the shine of that big silver rock that we call the United States of America. We breaking our necks to talk about the borders, people swarming over the borders. You don't want my opinion on that. Fuck them. If times is that bad that you got to walk across an open desert and drop your kid across a fence and leave it there, as they say, sympathy and charity starts at home. That's what they tell us. Pick yourself up by your bootstraps. Fight your government. Fight the power. That's what they tell us.
Well, I used to wonder a lot about how during the end of Reconstruction, people of color and people of goodwill understood what was happening. Did they know that African Americans were going to be completely disenfranchised and not be able to vote for 7 decades? Were they aware that violence was going to take hold in capitals throughout the South, that there were going to be coups? Did the media participate in it? Were they believing some of the lies or failing to ask the questions, failing to consider the source? And this moment makes me get a sense of what it must have been like. Lies being told, people believing, and people of goodwill being confused and not knowing what to do or what to make of it. See, what they need is for those who are for democracy to just be confused about it, and then they win. So the point that we have to be about...
Let me ask you folks a question. Again, this one thing I don't like about mainstream media. They try to be too politically correct sometimes. What is it about history that's confusing? Either it happened or it didn't. Either it's truth or it's fiction. We all thought that the adventures of Huck Finn was a fictional character, but actually the majority of the book actually happened. The author ad-libbed a little bit, but actually he was talking about his boyhood, his childhood. So that's art imitating life. But Star Trek ain't real, folks. They didn't go out in space and shoot and run into some Vulcans. We know that to be not true. We know Mork and Mindy, Nanu wasn't true. We know that George and Wheezy Jefferson in the 70s couldn't have came up like that. To a deluxe apartment in the sky in New York City. How many folks did you know in the 70s owned cleaners? Or how many black folks did you know in the 70s that owned businesses? Be actual and factual. Ask yourself that. See myself personally where I grew up at. I grew up around a bunch of entrepreneurs. All my uncles, my grandfather, his folks, his people that he worked with, they didn't work for anyone. Or if they did, they had a purpose of doing it. And it didn't take them very long to figure out, no, this is not where I need to be. But that's some history that they'll tell you that came easy for us. Whereas in 40, 50 years ago, a black man talking about working for himself or going to a bank to get a loan or moving into a place to where it's not rat infested, ate up, and you hear sirens all day. You couldn't go to a realtor and get a fair price, or they would steer you to a neighborhood that you would be the undesirable. That's what we're talking about, critical race theory. That's the thing. That's the kind of stuff that you're talking about. You don't have to go into detail of it, not unless the child asks. But you can tell a child in the 5th grade that segregation, although, and once you use the word although, that alarm, that tells people that although some say it was good, although also there are some people that say the worst thing that could have ever happened to them was being segregated and integrated. I don't know.
Out right now is saying, A, what critical race theory is, but more importantly, this is about all of racial justice. If you marched last year after George Floyd, if you have had a diversity training and suddenly you understand how you could do better in your workforce, then you are on our side on this, and you should not allow yourself to be taken to some hysterical set of beliefs about this big bad thing that you never heard of until the last month.
Indeed, and when I look at this current frenzy, Kimberly,
she said a mouthful just now, didn't she? This big bad 3-letter word. It's not something that they call AIDS. Was a 4-letter word actually. This big word that they shortened to 3 letters, CRT. They act like it's the big bad wolf. No, that motherfucker's the elephant in the room. You can't miss it. You just choose to act like it's not there. But it's there. It permeates. It's in the room waiting for somebody to bring it up. Y'all not gonna talk about me? Y'all don't see me? Okay. Guess I gotta go out and shoot a few more people. Maybe then we'll start talking about it. Y'all don't believe slavery existed? Okay. Let me give another kid in the inner city the internet access so he'll be able to go surf the internet and see what the history of this country really is. Again, I hate to bring up my fellow YouTubers, but go and see what they're talking about, folks. Go to your favorite YouTuber stream right now and see if they're not talking about each other. Angry Man's the hot topic this week. BGS is the hot topic last week. Kevin Samuels was the hot topic before that. What's the guy's name? The one that with the girl, the wife with the bonnet, was the hot topic before that. Cynthia G was the hot topic before that. Obsidian was the hot topic before that. The Manosphere thinks now that they broke mainstream because Kwame Brown spoke about O'Shea Duke Jackson. You talking about white America being brainwashed? You better check some of black America too, because their streams are full of folks who believe this shit here that they're talking about. I heard that on Angry Man stream the other night. He can't wait for the red wave to come back. So all of you scrags will get your just due. But he calls himself a black man. Personally, I don't see it. They ain't give you the name Juan for nothing. Manuel, nothing about you or the looks of you says black. Maybe that's why you find it so hard to disparage what these folks are talking about. Maybe that's why you love Trump so much, because you said the average person that hates Trump is broke. But from what I understand, my man, you broke as a joke. You broke as a broke dick dog. They over there feuding about who had the most streams, or who had the most views, or who had the most clicks, when we over here dealing with stuff like this on mainstream reality. This is real life right here. I made this space. I made this space popular. You let YouTube get mad at you, snatch everything up that you've done. Anchors away, my friend.
The right over critical race theory in our schools. It's coming for us. It reminds me as a Muslim of the frenzy over Sharia law, creeping Sharia back after 9/11, when you had states like Oklahoma amending their constitution to ban Sharia. Even though there are hardly any Muslims in Oklahoma, they may say it's not racist to be opposed to Sharia law or to be opposed to critical race theory. But then the same people end up behaving in a pretty obviously racist way, banning things that don't actually need banning, and that's the dog whistle.
Well, it's not a dog whistle anymore. It's a bullhorn. They have shaken the facade of a dog whistle, but let's understand why it works. It works because scapegoating has always worked to help people cover up their misdeeds and their crimes. Let's not forget, this is the party that has put democracy on life support. And now, while they have a pillow over its head, they're saying, look, critical race theory over there. This has been a tactic. It was used by Charles Stewart in Boston, who killed his own family and pointed to a black man, Susan Smith, who pointed to a black man who killed her own daughter. These are people who are killing democracy, and they know that they can distract people from that fact by pointing at black people, pointing at racial justice, pointing at ideas that they're uncomfortable with.
Is she wrong? Because I guarantee you right now, if this woman that you hear speaking was to go over to a Manosphere panel, she would be viciously attacked for what she just said. Because you hear over there all the time, it's the black woman's fault. Wait a minute, let me back up so you can hear exactly what she said again. Let me hear this again.
By pointing at black people, pointing at racial justice, pointing at ideas that they're uncomfortable with. We need to learn a lesson from that past. And
so how many times have you heard when we start bringing up the atrocities that white people do, the first thing they throw at us was, well, look at black on black crime. You go over to these panels and you hear the same things. Brothers and brothers fighting each other. Niggas ain't never done nothing. All they want to do is sit around and be dusties. That's the kind of rhetoric you hear from us. No, that's the popular rhetoric, I should say. That's what goes on. And 90.95, 97, 98% of the YouTube streams. I would say there's only 2% of the black YouTubers out here that give a damn, that put out information like this. And I can call them out by name. Even those so-called black power, they're all realizing now that, you know what, in order for me to get some followers, I got to pick somebody to fuck with. I got to cause some controversy somewhere. So let's talk about black on black crime. Like Dre would say, let's talk about them. What about them black mamas? Well, we gave you folks affirmative action. Well, I keep asking this question and nobody answered it yet. Tell me one thing that we've gotten from that black people have gotten that white people or some other ethnic group hasn't attached themselves to as soon as it became popular. I'll wait. The more I hear about critical race theory, the more you need to dispel it. There got to be some voice or reason out there, somebody who might click onto this video or this stream and say, hey, you know what? At least somebody got some kind of sense, got enough sense to at least put something out that contradicts this bullshit that they're talking. Because even when they're reported on regular mainstream TV, they still the person that's making the argument against critical race theory is the one that wins the arguments. That's what they report on day after day. Well, he came on Fox News and he said this, and that's what you hear. So it now becomes an echo chamber. It left Fox to go to mainstream media because they're trying to prove a point of how fucked up Fox News is. Or they're trying to prove a point of how fucked up OAN News is. So they'll just put them in the same cycle and repeat it over and over. Rinse and wash and rinse, wash and rinse, wash and rinse, over and over and over. Don Lemon talking about it. Then Chris Cuomo will talk about it. Then this person will talk about it. Then it ends up on the Sunday shows. When they got so much more to be dealing with, you need to be dealing with these so-called insurrectionists, because that's what they are. They all should be tried for treason. How in the hell is it that you see somebody storming the Capitol that came there with bad intentions? You got enough body camera footage to put several people behind bars, because remember what I said, this country has been at war since 1991, so the death penalty can be enacted if you want to go by the Declaration of Independence and the articles that preceded. Argue with me. I do my homework. Tell me about one of those insurrectionists that shouldn't be held up for treason, that shouldn't be tried for treason. We knew what their mission was, to go and interrupt the peaceful transfer of power. How many of you folks knew that that happened on January 6th before them folks stormed the Capitol? I could venture to say not too many. We all thought the election was over and done with. The inauguration, once the election was done and they said Joe Biden was the next president, the next thing we was waiting for make it official was January 20th. Well, see, someone put a businessman in the office, a tyrant, because everything that you heard about first from the Declaration of Independence exactly is how they describe Trump and the rest of those folks. How they describe King George and what they were trying to get away from is exactly how it is here. It's right now, it's modern day for black people. We're trying to get up from under, but y'all keep putting your foot on our neck. And every time we point it out, for some reason or the other, you guys got to figure out a way to turn the other cheek and say, no, it's all black people. You know, they're just being a little hysterical right now. Let's give them a holiday, Juneteenth, and they'll be all right. Well, my good friend Shar sent me a clip the other day with Judge Joe Brown on it. I hadn't seen this clip, didn't know Judge Joe Brown spoke on it, but we were different on some points. But if you listen to my stream and you listen to Judge Joe Brown, you'll say the same thing that I said about Juneteenth. It's a farce. It's a shut-up holiday. Shut up. We gave y'all a holiday. What else you want? Well, like I said, I don't need a day off because I work for my damn self. Give me something that's more tangible that everybody else ain't got their hands on. Everybody benefit from Juneteenth. Not everybody. How do I say this? Right. Yeah, everybody benefited from Juneteenth, but not everybody benefited from slavery. There was not no white man in 18-something that they had to come back to a second time and say, hey, you free. Go anywhere, be what you want to be. With what? With what? This is not my native land. What do I have? That's why a lot of the slaves didn't venture out too far away from Master's plantation. Because where would they go? No money, no shelter, no food, no water, no provisions. You're free. It's like the one of the voices of the old ladies that could recorded one of the last remaining alive slaves that got recorded. It just turned us out like the animals. Master Tom came out on the porch, called all the old folks and all the children, and they said, Master say, y'all free. Master say, y'all can go anywhere you want. And it just turned us out like cattle. What are we supposed to do? Lord of mercy. I'm sure I didn't sound like her, but I repeated it verbatim because I heard it enough. But we're not supposed to teach that. That would be harmful for a 7th, 6th grader or 5th grader to hear. That would be harmful, but yet you can go into school and they'll tell a 4th grader or 5th grader, if you feel like you're a girl trapped in a boy's body, it's all right to talk about that. It's all right to talk about that. It's all right to express who you feel you are at 5 years old. It's all right to express your sexuality of who you might be attracted to when you're old enough. How do you put those two words together? Somebody was asking me the other day about the gay pride parade. They were saying something about the gay pride parade, and me and my brother was listening to it. And I thought about all the gay pride parades that I witnessed in San Francisco and in New Orleans and in Vallejo, a few other places. Utter debauchery. They're walking around with dog collars, scantily clad. I even saw one, just no lie, I saw one woman with another woman with a dog leash, and she was walking the woman and she was on all fours. That is not an expression of who you love. That's an expression of your sexuality. Why do y'all need a parade for that? I don't see heterosexual men lining up with their wives, marching them down the street half naked. But they'll teach that in school. They'll tell you about Robert E. Lee and how great he was. But when it comes down to the way America treated us as black people, then it's reverse racism. What else can you say? Let's finish this clip.
Not let them get away with it again. It's up to us. We determine whether this is going to be effective or not.
We do indeed. Kimberly Crenshaw, an absolute pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for your insights and your analysis. I hope on race issues, including one literally called critical race theory. I want to put it in the mail to Ted Cruz's office. There's new polling out this week from The Economist, which found only 26% of Americans say they've heard a lot about critical race theory, with an additional 38% saying they've heard a little. Of those, a little.
That's the part I wanted to go back to. Only 26% of Americans say they've heard a lot about the movement. Why have they started hearing it all of a sudden? So it's obvious that it wasn't taught in schools, or a lot more people would have heard about it. With an additional 38% saying they've heard a little about it. Little about it meaning what? What did you hear about it? And 54% of those that say they have a good idea of what critical race theory is, of course, 54% of those people that they surveyed say they have a pretty good idea of what critical race theory is. But yet, we had 14 senators that wouldn't sign a bill to make Juneteenth a national holiday. Yet you'll walk down the street and the average white man will tell you, you know, I know slavery was a bad thing, but can we just move on from that? That was such a long time ago. You know, you ain't say that time heals a broken heart. Not when you're living in it. Not when the same thing that has happened in the 1960s is still happening in the 2000s and the 2021. Not when our athletes still having to make statements about the political and injustice treatment of black people through their greatness and through their sports. Who would have known about that young lady if she had not been on trying out for the Olympic team? Who would have known about her stance? Who would have known about Colin Kaepernick and his stance if he had not been a great football player? Let's face it, you have to be great to play in the NFL. Regardless of whether you're on the pine or you a starter, you still got to be great, because there's a whole lot of people that don't make it that far. This is America itself, the whole of America itself, on its founding traditions, folks. Ladies and gentlemen, I can't say it no more than this. On its founding traditions is inherently a racist country built on the backbone of people like me and you. They say that defunding the police and different things like that, but go look what the Republicans are doing. They say Donald Trump is such a great man, but in the 9 states where he held rallies at in the last waning days of the campaign, he still has yet to pay his bills. Yesterday, his main money man got arrested on charges of fraud and tax evasion. Think about our folks. Wesley Snipes, what happened to him? Red Fox, what happened to him? Toni Braxton, what happened to her? Do I need to keep going down a list of folks that lost their entire fortune behind not paying some taxes? But they keep saying that this country is not fundamentally racist, and when it is, anything that you talk about, you could bring black and white into it and see who and where the chips are stacked up favorably at. Myself and a white man, we committed the same crime, and the maximum amount of the years that they could give us is 40. I would get the 40 years with stipulation. He would get 10 years with stipulation. Never been in trouble before. He's a good kid. He's a good guy in this community. He works hard. Like black folks don't. These folks went about talking about the Second Amendment. I had the right to bear arms. Not if you black in this country. Ask Philando Castile. Well, no, you can't. Know why? One of them race soldiers gunned him down as soon as he asked for his pistol. Where is it at? And when he reached for it, guess what? He got pumped full of hot lead in front of his children. In front of his girlfriend. Might as well say wife. We watched George Floyd get choked out in front of us, screaming for his mama. And you still got some people that say, I'm on the side of Derek Chauvin. He was just doing his job, because that's how they see it. You're right. The police department fundamentally is not broken. You're absolutely right. It isn't. I see this in 1972. Speaking of 1972, sure, my oldest siblings, unfortunately, both of them are passed now. In the high school that they went to, of course, they would have been old enough to go to school back at the time of when the schools were desegregated. So they was the first, I won't say, I guess literate is a bad word to use, but they were the first black children to integrate the local school here. So I remember the days of my sister coming home telling my mom that I really don't want to go back there no more. All they did all day long was call me nigger and spit on me and spit at me. My oldest brother, the same thing. But did y'all go around the classes? No, we stayed in one class all day long because they felt somebody was going to hurt us. That was in the 70s. That's not too distant a history. But that's, according to them, critical race theory is something we should not be teaching. We shouldn't tell young children with impressionable minds that beating someone up and choking them out with a knee is not wrong. We shouldn't tell them that although affirmative action was designed for black people, more white people use it now than ever before, or more Chinese people, or more Asian people, or more Latino people. How many states right now is inactivating some kind of law to stop you from voting? How many Republicans and how many just average citizens are walking around saying right now that Donald Trump is the rightful president of the United States of America, knowing what they know about him? Knowing what they know about him. So when I hear these younger versions of black men on the YouTube streets making it all about the girls, that black women ain't shit, that pains me. I was in a stream last night. In fact, this was just DeAndre's stream. A lot of the young ladies were there. I'm not sure who it was. I don't, male or female, but he said, he or she said, "Wow, there's a lot of women over here." And I thought about it for a minute. You know, he's right, because when they come over here, they're not fucked with. You know, we don't treat them as cannon fodder. Oh, here go the scrag. Oh, she talking. Actually, we value their opinions. And you're right, crew. White women did benefit more of affirmative action than any other ethnic group. White women. Remember that commercial? Remember the commercial? I can pick up the bacon, fry it up in a pan. Y'all remember that old commercial? Arjulie. Again, just in those. Getting a little feedback. Folks hear me? Alright. But again, yeah. It's this program that I'm using. Let me turn the mic up just for a second. I'll play a quick commercial and we'll be right back.
And this is Cheryl Willie. Join us each and every Wednesday night at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or 6:30 p.m. Central Standard Time.
All right.
On the beat.
That's right, folks. Charles Willie, DJ Music, Classic R&B Jams Radio. That's on the beat.
Soulful sounds all around town.
That's one too.
If it's something hot you want,
Let's see if I can get this microphone to work correctly here, folks. And I'll let this side here play until I can figure this out again. Not sure why it still does it, but it still doesn't. It's not the headphones. Picture that.
Sunday is July 4th, Independence Day, which is when this country commemorates the adoption of the Declaration of Independence. In it, 13 North American British colonies announced their separation from Great Britain.
Every year for the past 32 years, Morning Edition has were not held as equal at the time.
What follows is a long list of grievances and charges against King George